Instructor Volmak had been teaching at the Galactic Youth Integration Center for 17 cycles, and he prided himself on never losing his composure. Not when little Zorfi ate 3 kilos of paste. Not when the Tentarian twins figured out how to rewire the gravity panels. Not even when that one Klaxon kid learned to scream at frequencies that shattered glass. But today, Volmak's 4 hands were trembling as he stared down at 8-year-old Mika Torres's artwork. It was supposed to be a drawing of peaceful cooperation between species. That was the assignment. The Zorflings had drawn flowers holding hands. The Tentarians had illustrated a lovely space station where everyone shared meals. Even grumpy little Krell had managed a crude but heartfelt picture of aliens playing some sort of ball game together. Mika Torres, the only human child in the program, had drawn a detailed schematic of what appeared to be an armored assault vehicle. "Mika," Volmak said, his voice carefully controlled, all 4 of his eyes blinking in sequence the way his species did when deeply confused. "Can you explain your drawing?" The small human looked up at him with wide brown eyes that seemed far too innocent for someone who had just labeled parts of her drawing with terms like reactive armor plating and coaxial machine gun. "It's a tank," she said cheerfully, like this explained everything. "An M1 Abrams. Well, technically this is more like an M1A2 because I gave it the upgraded thermal imaging system, but I couldn't remember if the side skirts were different, so I just guessed." Volmak's mandibles clicked nervously. "And this promotes peaceful cooperation how? Exactly?" Mika tilted her head, genuinely puzzled by his confusion. "Well, if everyone has good tanks, nobody wants to fight because it would be really expensive and messy. That's what Grandpa says. He was in the Battle of 73 Easting. He says overwhelming firepower is basically a peace strategy." "The Battle of what? Now?" 73 Easting. It was in Iraq. The first one, not the second one. Or maybe the third one. Humans have had a lot of Iraq wars. I lose track." She said this with the same casual tone another child might use to discuss episodes of a cartoon show. Volmak looked at the drawing again. Upon closer inspection, he noticed she had also drawn smaller vehicles around the tank, each carefully labeled Bradley Fighting Vehicle, Apache Helicopter, a 10 Warthog. "Mika, why do you know these things?" She shrugged. "Dad lets me play his video games, and sometimes we watch History Channel together. Last week we watched a whole documentary about the development of aerial dogfighting tactics in World War I. Did you know that early fighter pilots didn't even have guns? They just threw bricks at each other. Humans are so cool." Volmak felt a chill run down his primary spine and then his secondary spine for good measure. This was the species the Council had classified as Category 4, harmless but enthusiastic. This small child who discussed aerial combat like other children discussed their favorite snacks. He glanced at the other drawings again. Flowers holding hands, space stations, ball games, then back at Mika's increasingly detailed technical schematic. "I'm going to need to make a call," Volmak said quietly. "Okay," Mika said, already pulling out another sheet of paper. "Can I draw a helicopter next?" "Please don't." She was already sketching rotor blades. That evening, Volmak convened an emergency meeting with the other instructors in the staff lounge. The consensus was clear. The human child needed to understand that violence was not entertainment. She needed to learn that war was serious, tragic, and terrifying. "We'll tell her the old stories," said Instructor Krevix, a floating jellyfish-like being who pulsed an authoritative purple. "The ones that give nightmares. She'll learn proper fear and respect." "Brilliant," agreed Volmak, feeling like they'd finally found a solution. Nothing traumatizes younglings quite like the Battle of Crimson Nebula. They gathered the children for evening story time. The other kids cuddled their various appendages close, ready for the tale. Mika sat cross-legged on her cushion, looking interested. Krevix began the story, his voice dropping to an ominous rumble. "Long ago, the Zorgon Empire laid siege to the fortress world of Krandor Prime. 10,000 ships surrounded the planet. The defenders were outnumbered 50 to 1. The siege lasted 3 months before— Wait, Mika interrupted, raising her hand. "Did the defenders have orbital defense platforms?" Krevix's bioluminescence flickered in confusion. "Well, yes, they had 12 stations positioned around the and they lasted 3 months?" Mika looked genuinely baffled. What were the Zorgons doing, taking coffee breaks? With 50 to 1 numerical superiority, they should have overwhelmed the stations in a week, tops. Unless— She squinted thoughtfully. "Did the Zorgons not coordinate their attack waves? Please tell me they didn't just throw ships at the stations one at a time like a bad guy in a kung fu movie." Dead silence filled the room. They did, didn't they? Mika sighed. That's terrible tactics. My dad would call that feeding your army into a meat grinder. You need to concentrate overwhelming force at a single point, establish fire superiority, then exploit the breach. It's like basic stuff. Volmak's eye stalks drooped. Mika, this is supposed to be a frightening story about the horrors of war. Oh, it's horrifying. Mika agreed, but mostly because of the incompetent commanders. Those poor Zorgon soldiers deserved better leadership. Krevix, determined to salvage the lesson, tried another tale. Perhaps you'd prefer to hear about the Great Pursuit, where Commander Draxus chased the enemy fleet across 6-star systems. Across 6-star systems? Mika's eyes went wide. Did nobody on Draxus's side understand supply lines? You can't maintain an effective fighting force across that distance without established supply depots. What was his logistics plan? Please tell me he had a logistics plan. He relied on captured enemy supplies. Oh no. Mika put her face in her hands. That's guerrilla warfare strategy. You can't do that with a conventional fleet. If the enemy just scorched their own supplies before retreating, Draxus's entire army would have starved in space. Did nobody teach these people about Napoleon's invasion of Russia? Napoleon's what now? Volmak asked weakly. At that moment, the door chimed. Commander Draxus, a battle-scarred veteran visiting the station for a military ceremony, stood in the doorway. His reptilian features were arranged in what might have been curiosity. I heard shouting about logistics, Draxus said, his voice gravelly. Who is lecturing my former commander about his tactical failures? All eyes turned to Mika, who waved cheerfully. Hi, I'm Mika. No offense about your commander, but the 6-system pursuit was really risky. It worked out, I guess. But if I was the enemy, I would have just led him into a trap at the 4th system and surrounded his overextended supply lines. Then his whole fleet would have been stuck between my main force and my reserves with no fuel and no food. It's basically what happened to the Germans at Stalingrad, except in space. Draxus stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled up a chair, his interest clearly piqued despite himself. Explain Stalingrad, he said. Oh boy, said Volmak quietly. Here we go. Commander Draxus listened for 20 minutes as an 8-year-old human child explained urban warfare, encirclement tactics, and the logistical nightmare of fighting through a Russian winter. He said nothing, his expression unreadable behind his scaled features. When Mika finally finished with a cheerful, "And that's why you never invade Russia in the winter, Draxus," he was quiet for another full minute. You are a child, he finally said. Yep, Mika confirmed. And you know this. How? History Channel mostly. And games. Oh, and Dad's books. He has a whole shelf about World War II. That's the second one. The first one was also really bad, but the second one had more tanks. Draxus's tail twitched, which Volmak recognized as a sign of deep thought in his species. I have a scenario for you. A theoretical problem that has puzzled military strategists for generations. Ooh, fun, Mika said, sitting up straighter. Volmak wanted to intervene, to stop whatever was about to happen, but his vocal cords seemed to have stopped working. Draxus pulled up a holographic display. The defense of Station Terminus. Perhaps you've heard of it in your integration classes? The one where everyone died heroically? Mika asked. Yes. 10,000 defenders against 1 million attackers. They held for 3 days before being overwhelmed. It is considered the greatest last stand in galactic history. Draxus's voice carried reverence. Centuries of military scholars have analyzed this battle. The defenders performed optimally given their circumstances. It is taught as the example of perfect defensive warfare. Okay, Mika said. What's the scenario? If you were the defender commander, what would you have done differently? Mika looked at the holographic display of Station Terminus, rotating it with her small hands. She zoomed in on various sections, examined the defensive emplacements, checked the approach vectors. The other children had long since gotten bored and wandered off. The instructors watched in horrified fascination. Can I draw on this? Mika asked. Draxus nodded. Mika grabbed a light stylus and started marking up the display. Okay, so first problem. You've got your command center here, in the geographic center of the station. That's the most obvious place to put it. I'd move it here, to this maintenance sector that looks like a random junction, way less obvious target. She continued without pausing. Second, you've distributed your defensive weapons in a uniform pattern. That's pretty, but it's inefficient. You're wasting overlapping fields of fire. I'd cluster them here, here, and here, creating 3 kill zones with mutual support. Force the attackers into these approach lanes. Drexus leaned forward. Third, and this is the big one, you've kept all your defenders on the station. That's a siege mentality. With 1,000,000 attackers, you're not winning a defensive battle. You need to think offense. She drew quick lines extending from the station. You take your fastest ships, maybe 2,000 of your people, and you send them on harassment runs to the enemy logistics. Not to win fights, just to make them worry. Force them to dedicate ships to guard duty. Every ship guarding supplies is a ship not attacking you. That would leave the station with only 8,000 defenders, Drexus said slowly. Yeah, but the 1,000,000 attackers are now dealing with raiders behind their lines. They're funneling into your kill zones instead of spreading their attack evenly, and their commanders are bombing the wrong building because they think that's where you're hiding. Mika shrugged. You probably still lose eventually because 1,000,000 to 10,000 is really bad odds, but you'd last way longer than 3 days, maybe weeks. And you'd take a lot more of them with you. She added one more mark. Oh, and I'd rig the entire station to explode once we evacuated to the ships. If we're losing anyway, might as well take out a chunk of their invasion force on our way out. Scorched earth. Or scorched space, I guess. The room was absolutely silent. Drexus stared at the marked-up hologram, his combat-trained mind running through the implications. The instructors stared at Mika, who was humming softly and looking pleased with herself. How old are you again? Drexus asked quietly. 8 3/4, Mika said. The 3/4 is important. Right, said Drexus. Of course it is. He stood up, his decision clearly made. I need to make a call. That's what Instructor Volmak said too, Mika observed. Do I get in trouble for a lot of calls? No, child, Drexus said, his voice distant. I don't think trouble is quite the right word. Commander Drexus did not waste time. Within an hour, he had arranged an emergency video conference with the Galactic Military Council. Volmak tried to protest, something about proper channels and parental permission forms, but Drexus simply walked past him like he was furniture. Now Mika sat in a conference room that was far too large for her, her legs dangling off a chair designed for species twice her size, facing a holographic display showing 12 very important-looking aliens. They had titles like Supreme Admiral and Grand Strategic Overseer. They looked like they took themselves very seriously. This is the human child? This is the human child, asked Grand Admiral Thexilor, a being that resembled a floating brain in a containment suit. His voice dripped with skepticism. Yes, Grand Admiral, Drexus confirmed. Mika Torres, age 8. 8 3/4, Mika corrected helpfully. The 3/4 is apparently important, Drexus added with what might have been the tiniest hint of amusement. Admiral Thexilor's brain pulsed purple, which Volmak recognized as irritation. Commander Drexus, you pulled us from critical strategic planning to speak with a human child who doodled on a hologram? She redesigned the defensive station terminus in 5 minutes, sir. That got their attention. The casual conversation among the council members stopped immediately. Impossible, said Strategic Overseer Clix, a insectoid being with too many eyes. That scenario has been analyzed by our finest military minds for 3 centuries. There is no significantly better solution than what Commander Vrath executed. Show them, Drexus said quietly. Mika pulled up her modified hologram. So basically, Commander Vrath made some really understandable mistakes, but they were still mistakes. First, his command center placement was way too obvious. I moved it here. Then the defensive weapons were spread too thin, so I concentrated them into mutually supporting kill zones. But the real issue was the defensive mindset. You can't win a defensive battle at those odds, so I recommended offensive raiding parties to harass enemy logistics while rigging the station to explode during evacuation. It's not a victory, but it extends the defense significantly and inflicts maximum casualties on the enemy. The silence stretched for a solid 10 seconds. Where did you learn military tactics? Thexilor asked, his voice no longer skeptical. Now he sounded concerned. Oh, lots of places, Mika said brightly. My dad lets me play his strategy games. Total War is my favorite. I've beaten the Waterloo campaign on legendary difficulty. That one's really hard because Napoleon's forces are tired and the coalition has better positioning, so you have to be really aggressive early or you lose momentum and get surrounded. Total War, repeated Clix slowly. This is a human educational program? No, it's a game, for fun. Mika swung her legs back and forth. Though I guess you learn stuff too, like how pike formations work, and why cavalry charges are bad against prepared infantry squares, and the importance of holding high ground, and how artillery placement can decide a battle before infantry even engages. Strategic Coordinator Velm, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. She was an elegant being of pure energy, crackling with barely contained power. Child, you said your father lets you play these games. What does your father do? He drives a truck, Mika said. Long-haul freight. He used to be in the army, though. He did 4 tours in Afghanistan before I was born. 4 tours, Velm repeated. And Afghanistan is? A country on no Earth. There was a war there. Well, technically several wars. It's complicated. Humans call it the graveyard of empires because lots of big armies tried to conquer it and they all failed. The British, the Soviets, the Americans. Everyone learned that mountains and guerrilla warfare are a really bad combination for conventional forces. Admiral Thexilor's brain had turned a pale, sickly yellow. Your father fought in multiple military campaigns and now he drives a truck? Yeah, he says it's more relaxing. Plus the pay is better and nobody shoots at him. Mika paused thoughtfully. Well, almost nobody. He did have that one road rage incident in Nevada, but that was just a regular gun, not a military thing. Just a regular gun, Overseer Clicks whispered, his mandibles clicking in agitation. So your father is your military instructor? Velm asked, clearly trying to understand. Oh no. Dad doesn't really teach me that stuff formally. It's just what we talk about at dinner sometimes, or on long car rides. He tells really good stories about his deployments. Uncle Marcus teaches too, I guess. He's an ROTC instructor. ROTC? Several council members asked simultaneously. Reserve Officers Training Corps. It's how humans train military officers at universities. Uncle Marcus teaches college kids how to be army officers. He says it's like herding cats, except the cats can do push-ups. The council members looked at each other with what could only be described as growing panic. And what, Thexilor said carefully, does your mother do? Mom's a nurse. She was a combat medic in the Marines before she met Dad. She doesn't talk about her deployment as much, but she has really good stories about field medicine. Did you know the human body can survive really crazy injuries if you treat them fast enough? Mom says she once helped save a guy who got hit by shrapnel in 7 places. 7. And he lived and went back to duty 3 months later. Your mother was also military. Velm said flatly. Yeah, and Grandma was Navy, and Grandpa was Army like Dad, and my great-uncle was Air Force. Oh, and my cousin just enlisted in the Space Force, but Dad says that doesn't really count yet because they mostly just do satellite stuff. Mika thought for a moment. I think Aunt Sarah is the only one who wasn't military. She just works at a bank. Strategic Coordinator Velm turned to look directly at Commander Drexus. Is this normal for humans? Drexus, who had been doing his own research during the conversation, looked up from his datapad. His expression was grim. I have been reviewing human military history for the past 30 minutes. In the last 3,000 years, there have been approximately 268 years of total peace on Earth. That is counting regional peace, not global. For actual global peace, the number is 0 years. 0, Clicks repeated. Yes, sir. Humans have been in a state of warfare continuously for their entire recorded history, and their war technology has advanced correspondingly. They went from bronze swords to nuclear weapons in approximately 4,000 years. They went from the first powered aircraft to orbital spacecraft in 66 years. Mika perked up. Oh, are you talking about the Wright brothers to Apollo 11? That's one of my favorite timelines. The rate of innovation in warfare technology is really cool. Like, World War I started with horses and biplanes and ended with tanks and strategic bombing. Humans get really creative when they're trying to defeat each other. The council chamber was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Child, Admiral Thexilor said, his voice strained. Do you understand that most species in the galactic community have been at peace for thousands of years? Mika's eyes went wide. Wait, really? But then how do you test your military equipment? Or train your officers? Or develop new tactics? We use simulations, Velm said weakly. Just simulations? But simulations can't account for all variables. Nothing teaches you like actual combat experience. That's why war colleges study historical battles. You need real data. Mika looked genuinely concerned for them. What happens if you get attacked by someone aggressive? Do you have contingency plans? Mobilization procedures? A strategic reserve? We have the Galactic Defense Fleet, Click said defensively. Okay, but when's the last time they saw real combat? The council members looked at each other. 1,700 years ago, Thexilor admitted quietly. The Kryn incursion. Mika's expression was the perfect picture of polite horror. Your military hasn't fought a real war in 1,700 years? We achieved peaceful coexistence, Velm said, but she sounded uncertain now. That's great, really. Peace is good, Mika said carefully, in the tone of someone trying not to insult their elders. But your institutional knowledge is gone. Your officers have no combat experience. Your tactics are untested. Your equipment hasn't been proven in actual field conditions. She paused. If someone did attack you, like a peer-level threat, you'd be in really big trouble. The holographic displays flickered as the council members processed this. Commander Drexus cleared his throat. There is one more thing the council should know. He pulled up a new display. I had my staff research human military infrastructure. They have something called the Department of Defense. It employs approximately 3 million people in active duty, reserves, and civilian positions. This does not count veterans, which number in the tens of millions. Tens of millions? Clix's voice cracked. Yes, sir. They maintain this military during peacetime. Their military doctrine is based on something called overwhelming force and rapid decisive operations. They plan to win wars quickly through superior firepower and logistics. Drexus paused. Their military budget is larger than the WOD, GDP of most spacefaring species. During peacetime, Velm repeated hollowly. Yes, ma'am. Mika raised her hand. Can I ask a question? Please don't, Thexilor said. She asked anyway. Do you guys have military academies? Like, schools specifically for training military officers? We have. Leadership development programs, Clix said hesitantly. Humans have West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, Sandhurst, St. Cyr, and those are just the famous ones. Each military branch has multiple schools for different specializations. Tank warfare, naval operations, air combat, special operations, cyber warfare, space operations. Mika counted on her fingers. Oh, and staff colleges for senior officers. And war colleges for strategic planning. And, we understand, Thexilor interrupted. Humans take military education very seriously. Well, yeah, because if you're going to war, you should probably know what you're doing. People die otherwise. Good tactics save lives. She said this with the earnest certainty of a child repeating something she'd been taught. That's what Grandpa always says. He gets really mad at movies that show stupid tactics, because he says real soldiers deserve better. Strategic Coordinator Velm looked at Commander Drexus. What are human military professionals like, if this is their children's level of knowledge? Drexus pulled up another file. I have access to some human military publications. Their staff college produces papers on advanced combined arms operations, multi-domain warfare, expeditionary logistics, network-centric warfare. He scrolled through the list. Most of it is significantly beyond our current military theory. That's probably the Rand Corporation stuff, Mika offered helpfully. They're a think tank that studies warfare. Dad has some of their books. They're super dense but really interesting. They have civilian organizations that study warfare, Clix said, his voice hollow. Sure, lots of them. Rand, the war. College, Institute for the Study of War, all the defense contractors. Humans think about warfare a lot. Mika swung her legs cheerfully. It's kind of our thing. The council sat in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Thex Ilor spoke. Miss Torres, thank you for your time. You have been very educational. You're welcome. This was fun. Do you want me to explain carrier warfare next? Or maybe strategic bombing theory? Oh, or I could talk about combined arms tactics and how infantry, armor, artillery, and air support work together for that. Won't be necessary, Thexilor said quickly. Commander Drexus will escort you back to your dormitory. Okay. Mika hopped off the chair. Bye. Oh, wait, one more thing. You should probably study human history if you're worried about military stuff. We have really good documentation. Everything from ancient siege warfare to modern drone operations. It's all online and most of it's free. We will take that under advisement, Velm said weakly. As Drexus led Mika out of the conference room, the holographic connection remained active. Volmak watched as the most powerful military minds in the galactic community sat in horrified silence. So, Overseer Clix finally said, that was a human child. An average human child from a standard military family. Yes, Thexilor confirmed. And there are billions of humans. Yes, and they've been perfecting warfare for their entire existence. Yes, and their children play war games for entertainment. Yes. Another long silence. I propose, Strategic Coordinator, Velm said carefully, that we immediately update humanity's diplomatic classification from Category 4 to Category 1 Alpha. Category 1 Alpha is for species that pose an existential threat to galactic civilization, Clix pointed out. Yes, Velm said. I know. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Thexilor took a moment to compose himself, his brain pulsing through several colors before settling on a resigned blue. Before we proceed with the classification update, I need to ask the obvious question. He looked directly at where Mika had been sitting moments before. Commander Drexus, is the child still in audio range? No, sir. She's halfway down the corridor asking me about the differences between railguns and coil guns. Of course she is. Thexilor's brain flickered. All right, Council. We need to discuss the actual scope of this issue. Miss Torres indicated that her family's military involvement is normal. Can we confirm this? Strategic Coordinator Velm pulled up data on her display. I've been running queries through the human information network they call the Internet. It appears that approximately 7% of the current human population has military experience. That's roughly 800 million individuals with combat training. The number hung in the air like a weapon. 800 million, Overseer Clix repeated slowly. The entire galactic defense fleet comprises 2 million personnel. It gets worse, Velm continued, her energy field dimming with what might have been dread. Human military service is voluntary in most of their nations. They don't conscript. These 800 million people chose to join. Wait, said Council Member Bront, a crystalline being who had been silent until now. If only 7% serve and it's voluntary, what are the rest of them doing? Living normal civilian lives, Velm said. But here's the concerning part. Human military knowledge is not restricted to military personnel. Their entertainment media is filled with military content. Their children's games teach tactical thinking. Their educational systems include military history as standard curriculum. Their news media covers military operations in detail. They have entire television channels dedicated to military history. The History Channel, Drexus added from his audio feed. Miss Torres mentioned it. I looked it up. It's entertainment programming about warfare. Millions of humans watch it voluntarily. Admiral Thexilor's brain had gone pale. Their civilians study warfare for fun. Yes, sir. And it's not just passive consumption. Humans have online forums where they debate historical tactics. They run simulations. They write academic papers for recreation. There are human civilians with no military experience who can discuss logistical operations in detail because they find it interesting. Council Member Bront made a sound like grinding rocks. What about their actual military, their professionals? If the children and truck drivers are this knowledgeable, what are their warriors like? Drexus pulled up a new file. I accessed some human military publications. With respect, Council, I don't think you want to know. Tell us anyway, Thexilor said tiredly. Human military doctrine is based on what they call full-spectrum dominance. They don't plan to win battles. They plan to control land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace simultaneously. They have weapons that can strike anywhere on their planet within an hour. They have aircraft that cannot be detected. They have ships that carry enough firepower to level a continent. And they categorize all of this as conventional warfare. Conventional? Clix's mandibles clattered. What in the name of the First Light do they consider unconventional? Nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, Drexus said quietly. They invented nuclear weapons 80 years ago. They built enough of them to destroy their own planet several times over. Then they signed treaties to reduce the stockpiles because they decided mutually assured destruction was getting expensive. The council chamber was silent except for the hum of the holographic projectors. They built planet-killing weapons and their main concern was the cost, Velm said flatly. Yes, ma'am. The treaties are still in effect. Current estimates suggest humans maintain approximately 13,000 nuclear weapons in various nexted states of readiness. This is the reduced number. They used to have more. Council Member Bront's crystalline structure was vibrating with agitation. How is their planet still inhabited? They have something called deterrence theory, Drexus explained. If everyone has planet-killing weapons, nobody uses them because it would be suicide. So they just keep them as insurance and fight their wars with conventional weapons instead. That's insane, Click said. That's human, Drexus corrected. And apparently it works. They haven't had a nuclear war. They've had several non-nuclear wars, but no nuclear ones. Several non-nuclear wars, Thexilor repeated. How many is several? Drexus checked his data. In the last 80 years since they invented nuclear weapons, approximately 160 distinct armed conflicts, ranging from small regional disputes to large-scale conventional wars. 160 conflicts in 80 years, Velm calculated. That's 2 wars per year on average. while possessing planet-killing weapons they agreed not to use. Yes, ma'am. Strategic Coordinator Velm turned to address the full council. Do we have any information on human special operations forces? Elite units? Why would you want to know that? Bront asked. Because if their average soldiers are this capable, I'm terrified to learn what their elite warriors can do. Drexus hesitated. I have some information. It's incomplete because much of it is classified by human governments, but what's publicly available is disturbing enough. They have units called Navy SEALs, Special Air Service, Spetsnaz, Delta Force, and many others. These units undergo training that would be considered torture by galactic standards. The attrition rate for some programs exceeds 75%. They fail 3/4 of candidates? Clix asked. Yes, sir. The humans who pass are considered the most dangerous individuals on their planet. They train for years in everything from close combat to demolitions, to languages, to survival in hostile environments. There are documented cases of small teams of these operators defeating forces hundreds of times their size. How small? 6 to 12 individuals, typically. Overseer Clix's entire body shuddered. 12 humans defeated hundreds? In one documented case, a team of 13 humans held off a force of 3,000 for 12 hours while calling in air support. In another, a team of 6 infiltrated hostile territory, gathered intelligence, and extracted without being detected. Humans call these Tuesday. They have a specific day for suicide missions? Bront's voice cracked. No, sir. It's an expression. They mean it's routine. Not even noteworthy. The council sat in horrified silence. Admiral Thexilor finally spoke, his voice strained. What happens if humanity decides to expand aggressively into galactic space? Then we lose, Drexus said simply. We have no military tradition. Our soldiers train in peacetime simulations. Our officers study theory. Our weapons are designed for deterrence, not warfare. Humans have been fighting continuously for 3,000 years. Every generation passes knowledge to the next. Their tactics evolve constantly. Their technology is designed by people who actually use it in combat. We wouldn't stand a chance. Surely you're being pessimistic, Clix protested weakly. Am I? An 8-year-old child redesigned our most famous defensive battle in 5 minutes. She did it while casually discussing human history like it was bedtime stories. And she's not special. She's just a kid who watches TV with her dad. Drexus paused. Now imagine 10,000 of her, except they're adults with decades of military experience and access to weapons we can't even conceptualize. Strategic Coordinator Velm's energy field pulsed rapidly. We need to recategorize humanity immediately. Category 1 Alpha threat level. And we need to establish diplomatic protocols that ensure they never see us as enemies. Agreed, Thexilor said. But we have another problem. How do we explain this to the greater galactic community without causing panic? We tell them the truth, Velm said. Humanity is a species that has perfected warfare as an art form. They are not hostile, but they are extremely dangerous. We must ensure excellent relations with them at all costs. Friendship protocols, Bront added. Maximum cooperation. Whatever they want, we provide. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, technology sharing if requested. Anything to keep them happy. And we never, ever give them a reason to see us as a threat, Clix said firmly. The vote was unanimous. As the council meeting concluded, Drexus received a notification on his communicator. It was from Mika. She had sent him a video call request. He accepted it with a sense of mounting dread. Mika's cheerful face appeared on screen. She was back in her dormitory, sitting on her bed with what appeared to be a tablet computer. Hi, Commander Drexus. Thanks for the tour. I have a question for my homework assignment. Of course, Miss Torres. What is it? Well, we're supposed to write about cultural differences between species, and I was talking to my dad about it. He helped me with some of the concepts. She held up the tablet. Dad says most species don't teach their kids about military history the way humans do. Is that true? Drexus felt his blood chill. Yes, that's accurate. Okay, so Dad explained some stuff to me, and now I have a follow-up question. Her expression was innocently curious. What's a thermobaric weapon? Behind Drexus, through the still-active comm channel, he heard Admiral Thexilor make a sound that might have been a whimper. Why do you ask, Mika? Because Dad mentioned that humans developed them for urban warfare, but then he said I should ask an expert because he only knew the field application, not the engineering. So I figured a military commander would know. She smiled brightly. He said they're really effective against fortified positions because of the pressure wave mechanics. Drexus looked at the council. Every member was staring back at him with identical expressions of horror. Miss Torres, he said carefully. Perhaps that's a conversation for another time. Oh, okay. Can we talk about aircraft carriers instead? I'm doing a presentation on mobile force projection platforms, and I want to make sure I get the details right. You're doing a school presentation on aircraft carriers. Yeah, for my integration studies class. I figured I'd explain how humans move military power across oceans. It's really cool. Did you know a single carrier battle group has more firepower than some countries' entire militaries? Admiral Thexilor's brain had turned a color Drexus had never seen before. It might have been despair. That's very industrious of you, Mika. Drexus managed. I'm sure your presentation will be very educational. Thanks. Okay, I'll let you go. Bye. The screen went dark. The council chamber remained silent for a full 30 seconds. Change of plans, Admiral Thexilor said, his voice hollow. Upgrade humanity to Category 0. Category 0 doesn't exist, Clix pointed out. It does now, Thexilor said. It means do not provoke under any circumstances. Mark their space with warning beacons. Establish friendship protocols. And somebody start drafting a treaty ensuring permanent peace between humanity and the galactic community. What should the treaty say? Velm asked. I don't care. Just make sure it has a lot of the word friends in it. The vote, once again, was unanimous. 3 days later, Instructor Volmak watched as Mika cheerfully colored at her desk, humming a tune he didn't recognize. The other children played nearby, blissfully unaware that their human classmate had single-handedly caused a diplomatic crisis spanning 6 sectors. Commander Drexus appeared in the doorway. Miss Torres, would you like to visit the Orbital Military Museum this weekend, as thanks for your consultation? Mika looked up, eyes bright. Really? That sounds awesome. Will they have the good stuff? The good stuff? Drexus asked cautiously. Yeah, you know, the actual weapons and ships. Because Dad says most museums don't show the really interesting equipment because they're worried about giving people ideas. She tilted her head thoughtfully. But I guess if you're inviting me, it's probably okay? Drexus and Volmak exchanged glances. We'll have a full selection available, Drexus said carefully. Cool! Mika returned to her coloring, then paused. Oh, can I call my dad first? I want to ask him something. Of course, Volmak said, wondering what fresh horror awaited them. Mika pulled out a small communication device and initiated a video call. A tired-looking human male appeared on screen, sitting in what appeared to be a vehicle cabin. Hey, sweetie, what's up? I'm on a break between hauls. Hi, Dad. I got invited to a military museum, but I have a question for my homework first. Shoot. What's a thermobaric weapon? The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes shifted slightly off camera, as if checking to see who might be listening. That's an interesting question for homework, baby. Who's asking? Just me. Commander Drexus said we'd talk about it later, but I wanted to understand it now. Her father was quiet for a moment. Thermobaric means it uses heat and pressure. It's for enclosed spaces where you need to clear a structure without bringing the whole building down. Very effective, very dangerous. Don't try to build one. I'm 8, Dad. I'm not building bombs. Just making sure. Your teacher is having a panic attack behind you, isn't he? Mika turned around. Volmak was indeed holding 3 of his 4 hands over his mouth. She turned back. Yeah. Thought so. Her father smiled slightly. Listen, kiddo. Maybe ease up on the military talk. You're freaking out the nice aliens. But they started it. They tried to scare me with war stories. And how did that work out for them? I corrected their tactics. Her father laughed, the sound warm and genuine. That's my girl. Okay, go have fun at the museum. Love you. Love you too, Dad. The call ended. Mika looked at Drexus expectantly. So, this weekend? Yes, Drexus confirmed. This weekend. As Mika returned to her coloring, Drexus stepped into the hallway where Volmak followed him. How bad is it? Volmak asked quietly. The Council has designated human space as a maximum priority friendship zone. We're installing warning beacons, establishing preferential trade routes, and drafting a mutual defense treaty. Defense treaty? We're allying with them? We're making absolutely certain they never have a reason to see us as enemies, Drexus corrected. There's a difference. Back in the classroom, Mika's communication device chimed with another incoming call. She answered it cheerfully. Hey, Uncle Marcus. Hey, troublemaker. Your dad said you're asking about thermobaric weapons? Yeah, for school. School, right. Her uncle's laugh crackled through the speaker. Your old man also mentioned you redesigned some famous alien battle. That true? the defensive station terminus. They had terrible defensive positioning and no offensive strategy. Of course they did. Listen, when you get a minute, send me your analysis. Sounds like a good teaching exercise for my cadets. Really? Cool. Yeah. Oh, and kiddo? Maybe don't mention combined arms doctrine to the aliens. Apparently their military doesn't do that, and we don't want to give them an existential crisis. Too late, Mika said. I think I already did that. Attaboy. I mean, attagirl. Okay, go do your homework. And remember, flanking maneuvers are always the right answer. Unless you're in an urban environment with restricted sightlines. She learns. Okay, love you, bye. In the Galactic Council chambers, Admiral Thexilor received a notification that human commercial traffic had increased by 40% in the last 3 days. Trade requests were flooding in. Human diplomatic missions were expressing interest in cultural exchanges. It was exactly what they wanted, but somehow it felt ominous. Sir, his aide said quietly, there's something you should see. Human internet traffic analysis. What about it? There's been a massive spike in searches related to galactic species, our military capabilities, and our territorial holdings. Thexilor's brain pulsed a sickly yellow. They're researching us. Yes, sir. Extensively. Recommendations? Be very, very friendly. Back at the integration center, Mika finished her coloring. It was a picture of a spacecraft that looked disturbingly advanced. She held it up proudly. Instructor Volmak. Want to see my design for an improved cargo ship? Volmak looked at the drawing. It appeared to have weapons, hardpoints, reinforced armor plating, and what might have been launch bays for smaller craft. Mika, he said wearily, why does your cargo ship have weapons? She looked at him like he'd asked why water was wet. Because space is dangerous, obviously. You need to protect your supply lines. That's Logistics 101. Drexus, still standing in the doorway, pulled out his communicator and sent a message to the council. Recommend upgrading human classification to category -1. Befriend at all costs. The response was immediate and unanimous. Approved. Mika hummed cheerfully and started drawing another spacecraft. This one looked even more heavily armed. It was going to be a long year at the Integration Center, and somewhere in the Galactic Council chambers, they were already drafting the Eternal Friendship and Mutual Cooperation Treaty with humanity. The first draft was 70 pages long and mentioned friendship 412 times. It still didn't feel like enough.